Alright, welcome everybody to Not For Thought, episode 2. Today, I was thinking we would talk about some mythological worlds. So, what I mean by that, because I feel like that could be easily misinterpreted, I basically just mean any fictional world that's been made up by a person, I guess. Hopefully that makes sense. But I was thinking I would talk about, there's books and there's manga and there's comics, and I was thinking I would just talk about some of my input on those and favorites, and yeah, just kind of cover what fascinates me. I do think I'll have an episode entirely covering probably Hinduism and Buddhism and spirituality as a whole, or maybe I'll split that up into a couple different episodes. I'm not sure yet. As of now, I'm thinking that I'll just kind of cover like written mythological worlds. Anyways, let's get into the first topic. What I've kind of been spending a lot of time in reading a lot lately has been manga. And I'm guessing there's quite a few people that probably know what I'm talking about already, but for those that don't, manga is the comic version of anime. And if you don't know what anime is, well, look at that up, because I don't feel like explaining that. Sorry. But yeah, so manga is very interesting. I don't know how long it's been around. I'm sure it's been around for a long time. I know anime has been. An anime, I would assume, came after. But yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say I've read vast amounts of manga. I'm not super into just reading anything. It's got to have pretty good following already and have really good ratings and not be too crazy. So, for example, I read a lot of Shonen Jump anime, which is anime that's targeted towards kids basically, and it's action oriented and it's supposed to be silly and also very colorful and kind of cheesy in the sense of superheroes and villains in my eyes, which I love. Yeah, so manga is very, very fascinating. If you're somebody that reads comics or is into watching like Marvel movies, you should at least check out anime and definitely check out manga. If you're a reader like comics, I'm sure manga will fascinate you. I would be pretty surprised if you hadn't heard of manga, but at the same time, I hadn't really heard of it. I had heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. I assumed manga was much closer to comics, where, comics, I feel like you gotta collect a lot, You spend a couple dollars on a little comic that's like one chapter, basically, or maybe like two chapters, which is hardly anything. And it's kind of the same with manga, but you get a lot more out of each volume. Like, you can physically see the thickness of each volume, and with comics, they're like skinny little things. Anyways, so yeah, I decided probably about a year ago to start getting into manga, because I didn't really know about it. But my favorite anime is, just to list off a couple to give you an idea of what I watch. The first one that I watched was Dragon Ball Super to be specific, and I loved it, man. I fucking loved it. I actually watched it on an acid trip. I might make a whole story about that. Let me write that down. Alright, so then after that, I started to get into all the pretty big heavy hitters of shonen anime. My Hero Academia, Hunter x Hunter, One Punch Man, a couple other big ones, but the first one that I really got into was Dragon Ball, and then I think Hunter x Hunter after that. I loved My Hero Academia, but I went through it so fast. And I feel like every other season is good of that. Obviously, totally opinionated. But even based on the ratings, you can see the difference between seasons. Anyways, so yeah, I loved Dragon Ball and Hunter x Hunter and anime as a whole. It was just a whole new world for me of these completely mythological, made up worlds that are obviously targeted towards the hero and villain ideology, I guess. But nonetheless, I was a kid that loved, watching X-Men and reading little comics every once in a while and watching Marvel movies, like just anything related to the superhero and villain concept. I was watching it or reading it. Yeah. So finding out about anime, well, not necessarily finding out about it, but just getting into it was a life-changing experience in a way, I guess. And yeah, so let's talk about, I don't know, let's talk about Dragon Ball, I guess. Or, you know what? I've been reading a lot of Berserk, so I was thinking about maybe talking about this a little bit later, but it's what I'm reading right now, so fuck it. Anyways, it's a little bit more serious of an anime. Apparently, it's a horror anime, but I would basically just call it like a hardcore shonen anime. It's made by Dark Horse, so it's not Shonen Jump, and it's pretty intense. It's a very gruesome, hardcore manga, So it's definitely not a first read. If that was the first manga I read, I would have been horrified. I probably wouldn't have gotten into anything else. So, excuse me. So, Berserk was written by Kentaro Miura, who's actually passed away. There are 41 volumes of Berserk, and I have the first 5 plus like 5 more scattered throughout. But I've watched countless YouTube videos on Berserk. I forgot the YouTube channel that I watched it on, but if you look up Berserk Monster Manual, whoever created that, I wish I could shout him out because he did such a great job. But if you look that up on YouTube, you'll see his videos and they're incredible. It covers all of it. He does such a good job and he interprets everything in his own way, but a lot of it makes sense, and it's a lot of what I think I would have interpreted myself, and I think it makes sense, if that makes sense. Anyways, I would check it out just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about this manga, but it is so incredible. I mean, just think about a comic, if you've ever read a comic, and then take that and make it way more detailed, and then like quadruple the size of it lengthwise, and you've got a manga. So Berserk specifically, out of all the manga that I've read, I think has the best artwork out of anything I've read. I haven't read that much, like I said, but I've read enough to where I know that Berserk is incredibly detailed, and artwork is just, it's insane. If you're an artist, I would recommend just looking at this manga for the artwork because it's incredible. Like I said, some of it is pretty gruesome, so be warned. But at the same time, the further on that you go in this manga, the better the artwork gets. As with anything, the more you do something, the better you get at it. So the author, just as the series went on, just gets better and better and better at his artwork. And even at the beginning, it is so incredible. It's way better than anything I've achieved. And just in the first volume, he has, you could read a couple pages, and that's more than anything I've made in years. And he has 41 volumes of countless pages of artwork and this lore of philosophy and ideology and religion. All this shit that goes into this manga is so incredible, and it all just completely combined. Oh, fuck, I don't know how to explain it. He's just such a good writer. I would recommend anybody that's a comic book reader, any into anime, anything like that, to read Berserk. Or even if you're an artist, if you're into mythological worlds in any sort of way, this is a manga to read. And it's been out for a long time, so I'm not talking about anything new here. Like I said, it has 41 volumes, and the author has passed away, so this is not anything new. But it's so fucking good. I can't stop reading it. I'm wasting so much money because I feel like I have to have the physical version of this volume, or of this manga, but my god, it's so well written. The world itself and the lore behind it just is never ending. It's incredible. Kentaro Miura, the author, was just amazing. I mean, talk about putting the brains of being able to write and then the artistry and combining those two into one of the best anime, or I'm sorry, mangas, in my opinion. Like, yeah, it's something to read, and I felt like I just had to get that out there, man. It's incredible. But let's talk about another anime here. There's one that's pretty popular at the moment that if anybody is watching anime or reading manga, I'm sure that they've heard of this. It's called Chainsaw Man. And it's pretty good. But if you take that and then you read a couple of volumes of that, and then you read a couple of volumes of Berserk, you can see the difference in the artwork and how much the author has clearly developed the story before even writing it. So, yeah, it's incredible. Berserk and Chainsaw Man are really good. I love Chainsaw Man, but I think it is a little overhyped. I don't think the artwork even compares. My cat just tried to attack my wire. Bad little kitty. Um, so, yeah, but then take, excuse me, One Punch Man, and that is also a really, really good manga and anime. That's been coming out for a while, and I think it started as some like online game or story. I don't know. Something that wasn't very serious at first, and then people actually liked it. So, the author decided to actually create a manga out of it. And lo and behold, it actually turned out to be really fucking good. The artwork isn't made by one, it's made by another guy. I wish I could see. I can't quite make it out, but the artwork in that is so fucking good. It is absolutely incredible. I would highly recommend reading One Punch Man as well. And like I said, it was something that was pretty well created already. Not necessarily well created, but it already had a bunch of characters and things before it was even written. And so taking that and then putting like this whole universe, this whole made up world behind this already developed anime, or whatever it was at the time, ended up creating a really, really good manga. So I would highly recommend reading that as well. There's 24 English volumes at the moment, so I would recommend definitely checking that out or watching an episode if you haven't already. I'm sure most people have that are into anime and manga. So again, not talking about anything new, but One Punch Man will definitely change your view on anime if you haven't watched it yet. Like, if that was the first anime that I watched, I would have fallen in love just like I did watching Dragon Ball for the first time. So yeah, let's move into comics here. Comics are fucking incredible, man. Again, another YouTube channel that I can't remember. Comics Explain. That's what it is. Huge, huge YouTube channel. And he covers everything from Marvel, DC, Spawn. I don't know what else. He covers everything comics, man. He and his crew do a really good job. But I personally am really into Marvel. I'm into DC as well. But I love Marvel, man. I just love how is so involved in space and sci-fi, and I love how incredibly well done Stan Lee made it. You know, just at the beginning of all of Marvel, Stan Lee created this universe that was never ending, and other writers have just expanded on and made even better, And I love Marvel, and every time I read a Marvel comic, it just amazes me how well the colors are made, how good the drawings are, how well done the storyline is. Like it's always a good story, almost always. I guess there are some that aren't great, but I think I think the comics of Marvel are just very worth reading if you're into sci-fi and anything with mythological worlds. Marvel is obviously a pretty obvious one, and I'll get into the movies in a little bit. But yeah, the comics themselves are definitely nothing to overlook themselves. They're so good, So so I was also thinking I would talk about some books that I'm into. I guess I'm really into a lot of sci-fi shit, and one book that I've been reading a lot of, well, one, I guess, series of books I've been starting to read is Dune. I'm sure a lot of people know Dune since it had a movie released back in 2021, I think. And I hadn't really heard of Dune yet. I mean, I had heard of it, but I had never read it, never really got into it, hadn't watched the old movies, nothing like that. And when I had watched that movie, I thought it was good, but I knew that there was a lot that I was missing and I needed to to read. I know that after reading it and after watching a bunch of YouTube videos on the lore explanations, I realized that it's pretty hard to explain a lot of things, and I think the director does a pretty good job in the movie of portraying a lot of things that I think would have been pretty hard for other directors to do. But anyways, the book itself by Frank Herbert, my god, it's so well done. I mean, writers themselves, I wish I could just pick a brain of a writer for a little bit and see how they come up with these vast universes. I mean, Dune really is a universe, like Marvel Comics is also universe, but a lot of manga isn't really universe expanded. Dragon Ball Super obviously is, and that's an exception. I feel like Dragon Ball in itself is, I'm very biased towards, I love Dragon Ball, so, but there's lots of manga that isn't necessarily universal. Like even, well, Berserk kind of is. There's a lot in Berserk. Like I said, they cover, the author covers everything, man. Everything from philosophy to religion to horror to humor. I mean, hey, there's everything in it. So, but anyways, Dune truly is like a universal scale lore. It's never ending, and his son created, Brian Herbert, he created even more of the lore. He has a ton of books. I was looking through a Barnes and Noble for manga and Dune, and I came across so many more Dune books that I didn't even know existed. Man, like if you want to get into a series that truly is never ending and you can basically read forever, Dune is the one. And anime just as a whole, but Dune itself is just so vast. And I mean, there's languages, there's entire lore of certain planets and clans, and just it's incredible, and it's almost a headache trying to wrap your brain about how somebody comes up with an entire universe that isn't even real. I don't get that, man. And that's why I want to pick the brain of a writer sometime. But Yeah, let's talk about something else. I mean, there's a lot of the basics that I think are kind of overlooked too, like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, the big ones that have turned into movies. You know, I think that's really overlooked at times. People just read it or watch it and they're like, it's some nerdy crap. But in actuality, the thought that goes behind writing something like that is pretty incomprehensible, especially for the people that just like kind of shove it aside and don't even give it the credit that it's due. They clearly don't see what it takes to create a universe that isn't real. Creating a mythological world that's not something that can easily be achieved, and I've tried. I've tried myself. I remember when I was a kid, I had some times where I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a book or just like a quick novel sort of thing, and it never turned out. It was always boring. I remember like this one time I wrote this book. I was basically just copying something I had just read. I was like writing about, oh, this kid wakes up one day and his bus comes to his house and takes him to this weird land, and all of a sudden everything's all spiritual. I don't fucking know. I don't know what the hell I was writing, but I was also younger, and maybe it would be different if I tried now, but I don't think so. And when it comes to manga, that's tough. I would want to be the type of author that writes and draws. I can't just do one. I can't just do the drawing. I can't just do the writing. I would almost feel like I'm half-assing it. Nothing against the people that do that, because the people that do that tend to have really, really good work because, they can devote one person to writing it and they can devote one person to drawing it. And each of those people can focus way more on those things. But then you've got things like Berserk, where Kentaro Miura was a master of both. He was a master artist and writer, and that's where you get some really, really good work. But let's see. So, let's talk about Marvel movies, man. I know that they're pretty overrated in a lot of people's eyes, but at the same time, you gotta give it the credit that it's due. I think it's amazing that something like comics were created in the first place, and then they were liked by so many people that there started to be movies of it. I think that that's super cool in itself. And obviously the fact that Marvel does a really good job at what they do, not just writing comics but also creating the movies most of the time. There's exceptions, but, and I more mean rating, not even necessarily my own opinion, but rating wise, I mean they have some really well rated movies, and some of the profits on their movies have proven that a lot of people have enjoyed it. So yeah, I think it's super cool that movies have evolved to the point that we can create Marvel movies that genuinely look real. Because I mean, if you go back and watch some older ones, or even just like older Batman movies, you can see it's so much worse. I mean, in my opinion, obviously, I just think that the acting is so cheesy. I think people don't really know what they're doing when it comes to the graphics and effects, the special effects. It's just really underwhelming, I guess. And now we have the ability to truly make a movie that's entirely false. Alright, so I was thinking I would end this podcast with a quick story about an acid trip, since I was talking about manga and anime already. So, I think it was probably the third or fourth time that I had done acid. And I've done acid quite a few times. But this time I'm back at home with my dad. I'm in a pretty small room, just hanging by myself. And I think I just decided, like, I'm gonna do some acid. And I dropped a tab, I believe. I think it was only one. And I had a pretty fun night, but The most memorable part was really late in the night. You know how on Cartoon Network, like late at night, they start to play anime stuff, and then eventually they start to play like Robot Chicken, and I guess it turns into Adult Swim, I should say. But before that, I think they play a little bit of anime, and I don't remember what I was watching on Cartoon Network, but then all of a sudden Dragon Ball came on, and obviously I didn't put it on myself. It was the next episode to come on because I was watching live TV. Yeah, that was how long ago? It was like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, wow. That's crazy. Anyways, and I was also back at home, which my dad was like obsessed with having live TV. Even now, he might still have it. But anyways, so Dragon Ball starts playing, and I'm tripping on acid, right? And I just like fall in love. It was so good. The colors just blended so well. I mean, the music was incredible. I think the first episode that I saw was Dragon Ball Super. It was the episode where um, I guess I shouldn't spoil it. It was an episode where Goku has to face off against a copy of Vegeta, basically from this like sludge stuff. I don't think that spoils too much. But anyways, it was a really, really good episode. It was a perfect episode to be watching on acid. And then I watched a Dragon Ball Z episode. I believe it was the episode where he actually defeats Boo. And so that was actually really disappointing. I didn't find out until later that I had basically spoiled one of the main, most intimidating, scary villains in all of Dragon Ball Z, but it is what it is. Um, Man, Dragon Ball Z, oh, so fucking good. Dragon Ball Z is incredible. If you haven't seen it and you're in to the superhero mythological worlds, I would hella recommend trying Dragon Ball Super or Z first before Super, obviously. I mean, you should try it all the way back to just Dragon Ball, but Dragon Ball Z is really good when it comes to mixing it with weed and acid and shrooms. But even just watching it sober, it's still so fucking good. So, I think I might call it good here. I don't really have too much more to talk about, unfortunately. Um, I've been enjoying this. This has been a lot of fun. I'm gonna do some more, for sure. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with more ideas. It's not very easy, I guess. I mean, I have lots of stuff that I want to do, but then actually planning out like an episode can be challenging because I feel like I'm just boring myself. And if I have any listeners, I'm probably boring them as well. So I was just trying to keep it a little bit more interesting. And, there's obviously a lot of clickbait shit. And not that I wouldn't necessarily do that, but at the same time, I would actually like to have some pretty interesting podcasts here. So maybe if I gain any traction, I'll see what people want me to talk about, and maybe I'll start to do some research on some different topics. And I think the next one that I'll do is probably going to cover religion and spirituality.